week and a half later, I was interviewing. 4 days later, I had an offer, and a month later, I was here. So moved really quickly. But the last thing I'll say to answer your question is our challenges are a privilege. Because in the public sector, if you go back 2,500 years ago to the Athenian Oath, if we do our work well, we leave our communities more beautiful, more vibrant, and better for the next when we receive it. And we choose this. We are the best at our profession in an iconic city, in one of the most powerful and innovative nations in world history, at a moment when they all need us. So our challenges are a privilege, and that's why we're here.
Thank you, Rob, and welcome to Seattle. So, Joseph, I actually just learned now that that you're actually from the Bay Area, but you.
Sad but true. I root for the Niners. I know it's a terrible.
Yeah. The theme of this panel: transplants. But Joseph, I know that you have been. Yes, more transplantations happening. Okay, is this better? All right, guys, I'm just gonna sit like this. But Joseph, you have deep experience in the private sector, and you've spent most of your career here in Washington State, including a decade at Microsoft. What inspired your shift into public sector? And I'd love to hear from you, how you integrated some of that private sector expertise into your current role.
So in tech, if you're lucky, eventually you have money and you can make choices that aren't driven by money. So when I left Microsoft, I actually went to become the dean at the School of Business at Seattle Pacific University. That was my mission. So I actually was working with Lloyd at the time, and went off and did that for a couple of years. All of you are not recently out of college. It's not a fun place to be as an administrator anymore. So after 2 years, Governor Inslee gave me an opportunity to come work as a tech policy advisor. More public service. The pay in the state government is way worse than the city, so it really is a labor of love. And then I did that through Governor Inslee's second term, and then P&L wanted somebody to run their AI facility over on Dexter. I quit and did that. Then COVID hit, and that really sucked. It was not a fun time to be running an office where people had to work in the office. And so I left that to go run a big business with emphasis at the intersection of AI and cybersecurity, which was a lot of fun until I got a call to come back and finish out Jay's last year of his last term. And that's where I'm at right now. And actually, as you all know, Jay's not the governor anymore. So we're working with Ferguson on his priorities. And by the way, I love the Kraken season ticket holder.
Thank you, Rob and Joseph. So I want to pivot to current initiatives. You've both done a ton of work to get Seattle and Washington State established as leaders in digital government services. Could you each highlight one or two tech initiatives that you're most proud of and share the impact they've had on residents?
So let me go first because you have more to be proud of. No. Guess how many state agencies there are. Just guess. 190.
Yeah.
190. So anytime you do an integrative project, like we've been working on a residential portal for years, we're 80% done, and then the technology shifts, right? So it's a never-ending problem. I'm sure we're going to hear that the city council is a fun part of your world too, but our budgeting initiatives typically come from the legislature. So it's not just 190 agencies, it's over 100 legislators who have their own view of the world. Many of them come from Microsoft, and they have their own view of the way the world should work. Senator Wellman comes from Apple. She has her own view of the way the world should work. And so we're constantly trying to balance what we can afford, because the legislature has to fund a project, what we can actually do with the people that we have. We have very good people, but we pay at the low end of the band, so you get who you get. And then we have a lot of attrition, because once you get really good at something, you get hired out. And so managing all of that is really hard. Bill Keogh is our state CIO. He does a wonderful job of trying to balance all of that. And then on top of that, the governor calls him up and says, why haven't you done XYZ today? It's work, right? Why isn't that project finished, and that sort of thing. So it's very hard for the state to innovate, which is where I'm going. And so the commerce director, who's former Senator Joe Wynn, is all about digitizing commerce. He's announced a big initiative, but it's not funded yet, and he hasn't hired for it yet. And so we're in the process of setting aspirational goals, but actually getting there will be very hard. I think it's much easier, I'm going to say this, and you can say it wrong. I think it's much easier in the city, where it's a tighter community, and the distance between the council and your office is probably not as great as it is in the state. But that all said, we also have very complicated procurement rules. You have to comply with the HEAL Act and things like that. And so when you're selling to the state, which I would encourage you to do, we're good consumers in tech, but it's a complicated process, and you have to be in it for the long haul.
Let me go backwards before I go forward. Sounds like Rice Krispies. If you're a startup, and Christine knows this, like, I used to coach with Anderson Horowitz, their startups, and he said, you actually should be careful before you start bidding on government work, because the procurement channels are long, they're arduous, and they're few on the winds. So you have to be very selective about that. But some governments actually do structure to feed into that. So startups and residents, outcome-based procurements, where we make it easier. But a lot of procurements, they're not for the faint of heart. On the question, though, the thing I would tell you right now, our strategy that we set in 2024 to 2025 is actually, we're in the learn and impact phase. We have now 36 AI initiatives that we've completed. 80% of them, the first phase was, let's just learn a lot. Because 70% of AI companies, when we did our homework, are still losing money. Especially when you look past their books and their creative accounting on how they're accounting for some of their revenue, and their research and development agreements, and where they get some of their computing. And then it looks like 70% are still losing money. So 24, 25, learn and impact. We're going to see where AI can make a difference. And you do have that boring quadrant, where it's high impact, low learning, but AI can really make the administrivia of an organization a lot faster. And that's a high payoff quadrant. But there are things like in policing, robotic vision, resident response, where it can really pay off, virtual agents. But there's always a lot of nuance where it doesn't quite land right. And we predicted last year that you're going to see some kind of small language model and pricing revision in the market, because we thought with the hype phase it was due. Then DeepSeek and some pricing model stuff came out and said, oh, aren't we clever? But that's just business. And so we said, we're not going to over-bet and over-rotate in 24. Come middle of 25 to 26, the City of Seattle strategy is, this is where we should have some clarification in the market. We're going to see where the tech is going, where it stabilizes, where you're going to see some mid-sized players. You probably can always bet on the Microsofts and the Googles and those, but even they're going to have some competition, and their products are going to be clear. To your question, though, where we've seen some payoff is on robotic vision. So can we take a look at our pipe videos? I won't describe it too illustratively, because those pipes have stuff that you don't want to see. But whether or not we repair them, wastewater is a different euphemism for something else, but they require some repair. And we have lots of video of it, but can you detect what is actually broken and what you need to fix? And it takes a human or a robot. It's now, versus the models we had 2-3 years ago, and the high reliance on vendors, the models now are like 80% accurate pretty quickly. So we're seeing a lot of progress there, but can you get to something faster, cheaper? Records retention, redaction. We spend a lot of time in government on open records, and then the redaction of those records for what is permissible not to disclose because it's social security numbers, legal information, that kind of stuff. Right now, very manual. So those types of things, and then the administrative of creating communications content, those types of things. But 36 items in, 80% of them have been administrative tools, 70% of them haven't stuck. They say, yeah, it's cute, but is it really going to scale? And one more trend. We found 3 of them that act like malware. So we're like, that's smart, because there's such vibe going on around AI tools that some of them are using it and saying, who else is using it? Let's look at their contact list. Let's try to traverse once we get into the environment to look at what else we can see in that environment. And we've had a domain level block a couple of products, and they're like, we should have thought of that one quicker.
To be clear, my question was actually, I wanted you guys to highlight something you're proud of, and we went straight into the challenges.
Yes. We're proud of the scale in our approach. Yes. I can pitch.
Well, and I mean, I'm glad you brought up, complex procurement cycles and tight budget, tight timelines, right? I think, raise your hand if you understand how local budgets work. Oh, actually, good matter. All right, some stuff. Right, but it really is a constraint. And so, I did have I was going to ask you guys more about challenges, but I'm trying to motivate everyone to build in civic tech. So I'm going to go back to the original question. I really do want each of you to share just one case study, one project that your teams have launched, right, or currently administered, and just talk about who they're serving and the impact that they're having.
All right, so I'm going to give you actually 2 since I missed on the first time. Right now, we actually are doing something with GUI AI. They're actually in the room. And that's funded by Rockefeller as well. And we said there's 2 directions we can go. One is building one tool direction, and how do you make interacting and asking things in the city easier? So we have lots of phone numbers, we have lots of questions, so it's one version of the truth, you have any language. And they were kind enough to give us a grant on this one to work with us and say, let's do this and make that question and answer. And then you can parlay it into things like when FIFA comes. Can you also do versions of this to answer that and direct people to the right resources, the right places, that kind of thing. And there's a lot of learning, a lot of fun we're having with that. The other one is permitting. How do we call it permitting and customer trust. So permitting acceleration and customer trust. The mayor announced this in Mayor Harrell announced this one in his State of the City. So cities have to reinvent how we use our space because the demand for business space is a lot lower than it used to be since pre-COVID. And how we respond to our residents when they put in a request. The black hole is insufficient to the challenge today. And probably never was, but people are less tolerant. AI pre-check models. The thing that we're experimenting with now that looks really promising that didn't before. You can put in all your code, your best examples of what has been improved. And number one, a bot can say, ask a question about trees. You'd be amazed how complicated tree code is, what you can do to your tree and what you can't. Or building things, or an ADU, or accessory dwelling unit, and it can answer it in lay language. Language that you would actually understand. Have a master's degree, you have a doctorate degree, we still wouldn't understand what we can do and can't do without some real homework. But that, and you could submit things and say, if I submit my plans, it can tell you, we still need to refine it, with reasonable accuracy, say 70+%, if you submit this plan, 60% chance you're going to get denied. Or approved, sorry. But if you now change your square footage, if you increase your staffing, you decrease the number of children, you can get a 95% approval on the first submittal. That takes us from 6 to 9 months to get approval to a couple weeks. And all of a sudden, you can do things like if you go to LA where they have the Olympics and FIFA and just went through a fire, can you rebuild and do all those things at the same time as opposed to run into a log jam? Or for Seattle, can you reinvent your downtown because you look a lot different than pre-COVID?
Thank you, Rob. And I know there are some founders in the audience today building in the permitting space.
So probably the best project we worked on is This new federal administration is updating their guidelines constantly, and we run every pronouncement through an LLM model that we built, because they're big and long and lengthy, and they're boring as you could possibly believe. And that allows us to focus on what that's going to mean to the state. So, for example, U.S. Department of Commerce, EDA just announced a $1.45 billion program for counties that have had a FEMA declaration in 2023 or 2024. So our model actually parses through all the requirements. There are 6 functional areas. It helps us understand where we have the highest success. And then the model actually tells us which local government we should be working with in terms of doing that. King County had a disaster declaration because of the wildfires in 2023. Didn't pop King County up for us, but then we manually, man in the middle, take a look at it and say, well, we know King County had something. Why did that pop for us? We still don't know the answer, by the way. Sometimes it's a black box. But
Bill was the CIO for King County back in the day.
yeah. And so that's what we built on our own. It was 3 people, took a week, works great. The downside, there is a downside. The downside is that there's still a little prompt engineering that has to get done. And the people who used to work for Congress people do different prompt engineering than people who came out of the commercial sector. And so we've discovered vastly different results. And so we're actually kind of working on sort of a meta tool that will combine those and try to extract the best out of that. But one of the things that we like about AI right now is that we can do it ourselves, and then that helps us understand, like with permitting. I don't want to do permitting. I want to buy a product that does permitting. And so it helps you understand that you would rather see a commercial product than rather have to go manage this yourself. And I will. The success I should have pointed out is we do use AI for wildfire analysis. We use models from TechnoSilva, we use models from PNNL. We haven't settled on a single model yet, but it provides a lot of value to the Department of Ecology, the Department of Natural Resources, for the tribes, things like that. But we don't have a single source of truth, and that's another part that's complicated for the state. With 190 agencies, we might end up with 190 different models. You're laughing. San Jose was much simpler, wasn't it?
San Jose was so poor. You ever hear the philosophy, you're so far behind your head?
It's true. It was really hard for us to build a unified data system, but we were also, but sometimes Rob, I was there from 2020 to 22, so it was pre-Gen AI. So I sometimes still think everything we probably could have built and how fast we could have built it if we had the tools that are available now.
Well, actually, we were the first city to use generative AI. So in 2018, folks, you have spam and phishing attacks, right? And business email compromises. So someone will pretend to say, I want to change my paycheck deposit. It happened to we got an attack from our city manager. Said, so imagine your CEO almost gets their paycheck rerouted to a criminal's account. And we said, well, this could have been bad. So we said, we read about some of the natural language processing and machine learning. Said, I wonder if this could do stuff. And we teamed up with this company called Armor Blocks, startup, first 5 million. And we learned about GPT-1, no chat, no point to anything, and Claude, and we applied it, and we became immune to spam and phishing for 3 years. Not a single one made through. Because we could compare through an API to our Outlook, our email server. It could compare and say, there is a language difference on how you talk and how you talk with your vendors compared to these. The number is different, the language is different, the Nigerian Prince language, very different. But we always said in that 3 years, just wait until the criminals find this. So when ChatGPT came out, we were like, oh crud, the day has arrived. But at that point, we defined a path. We said the first iteration is going to be interactive, when you can work with GPT-1 in a more fruitful way. That ended up being ChatGPT. And then the second one, we said when you can be analytical, and that model can work with analytics. And then the other one was when you can make it actually act. And then when you can actually make it control. And then the last one where we said that was going to take over everything is we could string it all together. But that was our strategy in 2018. And it's kind of funny to see it's come together, but I made the joke at a conference in 2018, the IT CIO roundtable. Google was there, I was like, you have an existential threat on your hands. When this all happens, this natural language processing and machine learning, I think your search engine is done for, and we all laughed. But a couple of them still remember that. So remember that joke? I was like, yeah, I wasn't really joking, but we shall see.
So I'm going to transition the conversation from tech stacks to talent. Joseph, you actually alluded to this earlier around competing with the private sector for world-class talent. So I'd love to just hear from each of you, like, what do you think it takes to recruit, retain, grow top-tier technical talent in the public sector?
So we have...
Yeah, tell me.
So the state tends to hire people who are mission focused. So we appeal to the mission. And you would not be surprised, we have a lot of people from Joint Base Lewis McChord, we have a lot of people from Bangor, and a lot of people from Everett, and the Naval Air Station at Whitby, who ultimately want to continue their public service. They may have a pension from their military service, and so their monetary needs may not be so high, and they're willing to come work for the state. And we push that very hard. On the cybersecurity side, because the CISO's office has a lot of turnover, what they basically do is they're very straightforward, and they'll say, come work for us, you'll get your chops, we know you're going to leave in 4 years, but we'll get 4 years of good service out of you, and that's part of the model. And I think we just got hammered by our first layoff since the Great Recession in 2008. And so the idea that you can work for the government for 20 years and have a safe, secure job is kind of gone for the moment, both in the state government and the federal government. I think it's different in the city. So we're trying to actually redo our narrative right now. So it's not so much about job security as it is about the mission, about the service to the state, to the people, and the fact that you'll hone your skills on the technical side. But I mean, we can't compete with Meta for $1 million a year AI scientist. It's just not going to happen. Oh, the other thing we do is we leverage our vendors. So we assume that our vendors are hiring very, very talented people.
We actually just inverted. So I joined the city about a year ago. We said we're not going to chase the people we're chasing pay and service. We can always learn together, but it is mission first. And that mission should matter because IT, our mission actually spoke to, we are a great partner because we're technologists, and we actually said, no, that's not true. We're great IT because we unleash the brilliance of our people. And that has to be part of our sense of mission because we're going to run towards, why do people work for a city? Because housing means a lot to me, because public safety means a lot to me, because transportation means a lot to me, because the community means a lot to me. And that should be at your heart. And then you will do a lot because we won't feel stressed if you're passionate. You will go far if you care. And that's who we're going to hire for. So we look for constructive energy, people who've solved problems, didn't give up, have been a part of a team. And those are the questions that we ask. Not, did you get a certification? What technical knowledge are you bragging about? But what did you solve with others? And how did you do it over time? And how are you persistent? But those are the people that are going to find Seattle IT and a city. And then the thing that keeps them is the work that we do, the transparency that we have, and who we get to work with. So those vendor and startup partnerships, that's where you get to not just buy something, but you get to create something. And Christine knows this, is those partnerships are where people get to have a lot of fun, and you're not normal. You can go do the more work anywhere, but when you're working at Zoom or a startup, then you get to see them be a $20, $30 billion company, or you're doing the first micro-segmentation in the city, or you're doing AI before anyone else, or you create a Big Gov AI coalition, which is the biggest AI coalition in the country, and it's cities and universities and utilities, and you create things. People won't leave, even though you're the leanest big city in the country in San Jose or in Seattle we have bigger ambitions. But it's not just getting in the door, but the work and the meaning behind it, which will keep them there. And then, where's your focus? Where are you going? And it's okay if we help people grow away, because we also want to be very transparent about what their goals are. And if we have to help them get there by leading the IT team, hopefully it's somewhere else in the city, that's cool too, but we just want them to know our commitment is great work and their growth. And it's amazing how often they step up in amazing ways. Thank you.
Thank you both. I mean, that's certain.
And look.
Rob's just saying, I worked in government right after business school. It certainly, because, and I graduated from business school in 2020. I've never regretted it, and it really changed the course of my career. So I think this is actually a great way to kind of, and I had one last question before we turn it over to the audience. Many people in the audience today are startup founders or technologists eager to support government. Would love to just get each of your take on what do you think they should know about working with local or state government? What makes for a successful partnership?
Okay. So procurement at the state is very complicated, and we work with other states. We have the National Governors Association, we have the Democratic Governors Association. We learn a lot. Actually, we're working with the city of Amsterdam right now on understanding why their AI model broke down for the welfare system. So it was a 5-year project that exploded, imploded, and that was dead. So we work with everybody to try to get ideas, and we're like private corporations. You get an elected official who reads a magazine on the airplane, and they go, "Oh, I gotta have one of those,"
Yeah.
and then they bring it back to the state, and we try to figure out how to make that work. If I'm a vendor, what I'm looking for is something that the state specifically needs. And one of the things that you can do is we air all of our dirty laundry in legislative hearings every year. I mean, it's very easy to find out what we don't have, what we need, what we're fighting about, what is really a need that's being not addressed right now. And so we're pretty transparent with respect to that. And I would say, if you really want to sell to the state, pay attention to what the state is trying to solve. Right now, the biggest problems the state is trying to solve revolve around housing, K through 12 special ed, and drug addiction problems. So if you got a solution in those spaces, the state's super interested in those. Also, bear in mind, we partnered with King County, we partnered with Seattle, and so if you come up with a solution that Seattle adopts and it might work for the state, that's also leverage.
The coaching I give to start, so usually with Anderson Horowitz and L3, was be organizationally aware. So governments work in a certain way, public procurement, budget, they're generally the same other than Louisiana, which has parish law. But there is a structure to be aware of, and you have to know how that works. And then there's know how the relationships work. Because if you don't fold in like a CIO, they can make your life hard. If you don't reach out to the department head who actually owns the process, you might not get anywhere. If you talk with a council member and not the people who actually own the operational work, they might all get pissed at you. And I probably shouldn't have said it that way. But anyway, there's a lot of needles to thread, and that stakeholder analysis actually does matter. Because there's in government, a lot of people who can say no, and what you're striking for is the right number of yeses, if you want the right path. And it sounds hard, but then you get to number 3 is you have to have a couple wins. As soon as you get to that couple wins in that product, you're aiming to Lego it. I can take this 80% solution and I know how to do the other 20% to go elsewhere. And there's this magic thing called the cooperative clause. So in public procurement, if you get a contract with a significant organization, and other governments can choose to accept that competitive procurement that another did. It can't be a small organization, because the Rialto case said when the city of LA tried to use the procurement for a small city, they said that's cheating because that small city didn't get the same deal that a big city would have gotten. you're just trying to bypass doing the work of procuring it. So no, you can't use that. But if you get a significant city, mid-sized to big, you can tell them, I can help you past the procurement process. And Christine knows this. Most CIOs, most directors would sell their first child before doing a procurement process too. So they're on the same side as you. But actually, I like procurements. They're fun. But most would bypass the process if they could. And then you have a few who are trying to be creative. So Mark McIntyre, our economic development director, and I, we're actually creating something we created in San Jose, which was the innovation demonstration of policy, which is a commitment by the city that we want to work with our smalls and medium-sized businesses and startups, that we want to channel business to them and have outcome-based procurements and learn together, and that feeds into larger procurements. But for 1 and 2 year business solutions, give us your best shots. And that not everything has to go to the biggest products, because a lot of times we are trying to learn, and new technologies are the best option. And so let's define the inputs and the outcomes, but we don't have to over-define the middle. And we sometimes are guilty of over-engineering and over-requiring, and we need to get out of that business. And there's a lot of brilliance out there in industry, and we need to build to account for that and allow for that.
Yeah, I got to end by giving San Jose a shout out. Mike is back up. What a micro. Okay. Because, yes, you obviously hear like government procurement is broken. If you think it's hard at state and local, wait till you figure out how the DoD buys technology. It's even crazier. But there has actually been a lot of progress and a lot of innovations. Some of that driven by folks like Rob and Albert and Steven, Jordan, our wonderful colleagues in San Jose. You heard them mention Gov AI Coalition, which Seattle is a part of, right? That's an initiative that really got started, I think, around 2022.
That was my assignment to Cal when I hired him.
Yes, and Calvin, yes. Okay, the list goes on. We have great colleagues in San Jose. And that was around standardizing the way AI companies could sell into government. I'm on the selection committee for the San Jose AI Initiative, right, which is the first time the city started giving out non-dilutive grants for, just to build that relationship, right? Like they're basically de-risking, piloting, and working with the city by literally putting out RFPs and grants out there to support their startup ecosystems, right? And I know there are a lot of these examples in San Jose. They are also present across Washington State and Seattle. And, just the fact that Joseph and Rob are extremely busy people, and they took time out of their busy weekday to spend time with you. This is them trying to build a relationship with you all, and I guess encourage folks to walk through their doors and partner with them. So with that, first of all, Rob and Joseph, thank you for your insights today. Thank you for your leadership and your public service. And I'd love to turn it over to you all for some questions. All right, Roy.
I was curious, what's the attitude in both, the state and city level to vibe coding? And is it going to change, the internal, speed, deployment, work with vendors? How is your impression on it?
You go first.
So I've seen vibe coding in action twice, and one was a holy failure, and the other one you're like, there's something here long term. And one was in NVIDIA, and I'm not sure if they just nursed it along better. But you're like, that, it coded some web interfaces better than I could have. It's been a long time since I've been a developer, so it should have been able to. But the other one, it just didn't work. And the developers in the room was like, that is junk. But I'm not sure if they also said that because they were like, I'm offended that it's there. But it's hard. Because of the way the technology works, it's hard to not see that it can do that work and get better over time. The iterative nature, it's going to be a tool to at least do the basics, if not the moderate work, right? And it's the right type of technology for the right type of work, but there's also the management of the whole solution. And how do you piece everything together? I think that takes a level of orchestration that it doesn't do yet, or won't know how to near term. But hey, it might be our overlords and tell us what to do. So I think it will have a place, and it will have a place at one part of our stack, at the low to no code side. And then some of our more advanced solutions, I don't see it in at least the next 5 years. But we wouldn't trust it on some of our most mission critical solutions, because those are going to be the crown jewels that are like, we're going to try to true for at least the next 5 to 7 years. And then we'll reevaluate from there.
I haven't seen an announcement of vibe coding yet, Roy. My guess is it's banned for the state right now. That all said, I work with very large data sets. I hate coding in R, and I've been vibe coding since the beginning of the year, and it's very effective. My guess would be any vibe coding we're seeing in the states kind of off the books. And that's not allowed, by the way. I could get in trouble.
Turn off the live stream. Yeah. Yes.
I have a really simple question. There's an empty chair here, which I imagine is occupied by somebody from King County. My question is, if you were
No, it's because of the speakers.
Oh. But as founder of an AI startup, is it easiest to work with the city, the county, or the state? If I had to choose one.
Depends what you're trying to do. So remember that different domains of government have different responsibilities. Counties are subdivisions of the state. If you're doing sheriff or human services or health, you're going to shoot for the county. Local government, the city does more of the parks and recreation. You're going to be doing more of the municipal court, just different divisions. So it depends what your service is. If it's more general, you're going to target all three. And so I would say depends what you're targeting. In terms of speed and innovation, cities tend to be more because the counties have a linkage to the states, and no offense, states tend to have more structure and have to go through a legislative process, and the budget process is a 2-year, and you have to convince 200 to 400 people depending which state you're in. Don't normally move as fast as a body of 7 to 12 people. So I think in your comments were consistent with this. You can experiment a little bit better. I've been at the state, I've been at the local. I stay at the local for a reason. When I was at the state, I had to know what I was trying to do 3 years ahead of time, so I put the budget 2 years ahead of time, so I get the money 2 years later. It requires a good amount of wisdom and planning. But the city council members were like, I want this now, and we can work with it. And Joe Nguyen is probably the best at, like, I want to now, and finding a way, the commerce, Senator Nguyen, director? Yeah. But very few people are that effective in that way. Hopefully that answers your question.
I got a better answer. So everything is a matter of timing and a matter of funds that need to get spent. So we recently had one of the, there's 3 counties that have all the population, right? Snohomish, King, and Pierce. One of the 3 recently got some Infrastructure Reduction Act money 2.5 years ago, and they had to spend $1 million right away. And there happened to be someone out of one of the 5G Open Innovation Lab projects that had a proposal to go, and poof, $1 million went just right out the door. And if you were trying to sell into FIFA right now, it's too late, right? They're too far down the path. Your timing would have been, a year ago to get anything sold to FIFA. So it comes down to, state is really long tail when it comes to getting this stuff done. But I've seen counties that have money they need to spend. I've seen cities that have money they need to spend. It's not their taxpayer money in most cases. They're block grants or something that comes from the federal government. And so you just need to be aware. And they don't typically advertise. You're talking to a county exec, or you're talking to Bob Kettle when you have an idea, and he talks to you and you say,
Councilmember.
Yeah, councilmember. He talks to you and you say, well, I have a little bit of money that came from the state, I can do something. So it's that kind of the system.
Awesome answers, thank you.
Wow, okay. All right, I want to be mindful of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have each of you just say your questions. Rob and Joseph, try to remember them, and then I'm just going to have you all answer at once. So I'll start with, just say your name. Okay.
So hi, thank you so much for the wonderful talk. So I have a question. So as you're saying, you have some problems existing, and so being a founder of a genuine company, and I say I have a solution, probably I can solve some of the existing problems we have. So what are the best way to approach you so that we can have a conversation and move forward?
Are you going to do a series of questions?
We're going to do a series of questions, right? So advice for startup founders building in this space.
This question around
Yes, all right, let's go for it.
centralization versus decentralized and procurement processes. You can talk a little bit about what you offer versus other departments and post departments or housing or others, and how a startup founder would navigate that.
So I do clusters of 3 or?
Yeah, let's take one more. So you've had your hand up.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Pankaj. I run Place AI. It's a company that tries to accelerate public sector service delivery. You talked about houselessness. 20% of the houseless population right now, a contributing factor is the delay in getting benefits that they have applied for. This can be solved at a state level. And at a city level, you can predict who's at risk of being houseless in the next 3 to 4 months and mobilize local initiatives and organizations. Here's my question. You have the appetite to solve this problem. You identified it as a problem to solve. I have a solution for it, but it's really, really difficult for me to get a meeting with anybody to fix this case. And I know it's about relationship building, but if I can't get my foot in the door and have a conversation with you guys, then how do we solve this, right? So you've got to help me get an avenue. So that's the question. How do I do this?
So some of them are connected. Let me tell you what we do, and it is rare. So let me give you kind of 3 answers at the same time. First is central versus decentral. City of Seattle is one of the few centralized IT departments. We are 630 people. We're about $300 million. When I was at City of San Jose, which was a larger city, decentralized, but the central IT department, and you'll laugh. When I got there, we had 76 people. For the 10th largest city, we're the 18th here, and we had a $27 million budget, so 1/10. And if you look at everything across the city of San Jose, it was about 150 people versus 630 here, and it was about $60 million versus 300 million here. So orders of magnitude. So very different. You can go city. Let me give you another couple numbers. 39,000 cities, counties, towns in America. Of those, you only have 12 cities that are 1 million people and above. And you've got about 30 odd some counties. So just know your distribution curve. Over 87% of cities are 100,000 people or less. And have 400 or less city employees. And you do the math there, their IT department is actually quite small. So when you're talking about they need to hear me, there's not that many of them and they're pretty busy. But know your audience, know your addressable market. So let's go to my email account. Every day I get 80 to 130 people who tell me I have the perfect answer for you. I wish I were kidding. I'm sure they're right. And I often think of that cartoon where you're like, I don't have time for you. I'm off to go fight a war with a sword. And they're like, but I have a machine gun. And I'm like, I just wish I had time for machine guns. But now let me answer your question in 3 different ways. We put out our strategic plan, our work plan. And when someone reaches out, I was like, I really don't have time to talk with you if you haven't done your homework. So have you read the strategic plan? Have you read the work plan? If no, you haven't done your homework. Come back with it. Number 2 is you should know the audience and the space, because we all know each other and talk with each other. Every day, every other day, the top sales, we actually chat with you. It's pretty incestuous. I've helped a lot of them get their jobs. So we share those. Once you're successful, your name will be known. So your reputation is your brand, is you. And number 3 is you have to compete for the work and be ready to win. I will make time. I reserve 2 hours a week to meet with folks that actually say, I've done my homework, I can address the problems that you prioritize, and we go with those things. but you have to get through the filter, be that top priority problem, have done your homework, and have something that's mature enough. And on yours, we have Civiform. We actually have created something with Google.org where it takes 23 services, and through one application, you can get, for people with low income, you get approved for all of those through one app. And so if you reached out to us, we would tell you we're okay, at least on some of those, but on homelessness or housing insecurity, we have more work to do, and there's many variables on that one. But the last thing I'll say, and turn it over, is there was a time in cities, and I make this analogy all the time, where if it's a police issue, you go to the police, or public safety issue, you go to public police department or fire department. If it was something on the street, you go to the transportation department. But when we talk about all cities, they have roughly the same stack. It is public safety. It is housing and homelessness and blight. It is health and addiction. It is economic vitality. It is economic opportunity for kids and people. Just a different order for every city. But every city has the same stack, and you'll hear every politician at the local level say the same things, just a different order, or they'll focus on a few. And those are the kind of the truths of the day. But the other thing to notice is that none of those is one department anymore. And so instead of swim lanes, we have water polo. And IT's job, what I tell our organization, is to create that pool where we allow the organization to shoot at that goal. We're sharing the right information, we have the right situation awareness, we can collaborate, but we all get to shoot at the same goal. And on the decentralization and centralized question, that's where we earn our worth in the organization, is how we enable the organization to do what it needs to do to accomplish the things that it needs to accomplish. And that's your modern IT organization.
State is sort of centralized, so we have centralized enterprise services that Bill Keel runs. So he runs the Workday stack, he runs the Microsoft stack, that kind of stuff. But if you're selling a specific solution to a specific department, like wastewater management, that's probably ecology, and you don't need to talk to Commerce about that. And part of being successful in selling to the state is knowing who you're selling to, so that you go to the right authority. The other part of it is we're horribly transparent with our budgets. You'll know by looking at our budgets if we have any kind of funding for something that's an expensive solution. And the legislature passes these initiatives. The budget's only 192 pages. You can run it through Claude and find what you need. And then go hunt down the person who's attached to that problem space. The problem is, as you mentioned, we probably scouted it out 2 years ago. Put in a legislative request, it got passed, and we already kind of know who we're going to work with. So you want to stay ahead of where you're at in terms of working with the state. The other thing I'll say is it's very hard to meet people in the state. They don't actually even work in the buildings anymore. We're all kind of distributed, working from home. And so you end up having to go to events like this, which is where you'll end up meeting people. You guys have a return to office?
We do. So we're 3 days a week. Actually, on your point though, Washington Digital Government Summit is one. But there are events where people go to, and Bill encourages people to go to them too, because you can share ideas. And some of them, as vendors, you do have to pay to go to. I know that's a barrier, but yeah, you're right. And some states are more barriered than others.
Thank you all. I just want to thank everyone for the questions, the engagement, for all of you being here. I guess this is sort of the new town hall, post-COVID town hall. And Joseph and Rob, I know how busy you both are, so thank you so much for giving us your lunch break. And I'm now going to pass it over to Audrey, because we have some fantastic Civic Tech founders here, and Audrey's going to moderate that conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, y'all. Okay. We're gonna have all of our speakers here. Thank you guys so much. That was incredible. Let me turn this up.
Yeah, Audrey, mics are, do we need the mics? Do they need the mics? Yeah.
Great. Hi, guys. Thanks for being part of this panel. So I just wanted to have a discussion. I have a ton of questions, so I kind of want to get through things. I know we're a little pressed on time, but I have a ton of questions from people who are building the stuff and actually are working, with service to the government and the public sector. But really quick, if you guys could just give a quick intro to yourselves and what is really exciting for you in the space and what your passion project is.
Absolutely.
Oh, those are just this. Yeah, for the live stream.
Absolutely. There you go. My name is Xander Brahma. I'm the founder and CEO of Game East, and we are a gaming data analytics company. And our intersection with the public sector is actually taking those same insights and understanding, massive player behavior at scale, as you would in a normal game, and extending that to areas within government like DoD. So for wargaming, for example, wargaming has been for a long time kind of stuck in this one of two sort of situations. One, you might have this vision of a bunch of generals in a war room, cigars, with a tabletop game, and that definitely still exists. But for digital wargaming, it's been stuck in this position where it's like in late 90s, early 2000s real-time strategy game. And when you consider that most of the service members today grew up playing, say, Call of Duty, they're not really incentivized to touch and interact with that. And there's one general we're working with said, we're not doing a very good job of teaching the family business. And so what's very exciting to me about Civic Tech is that, America is globally recognized for our hub of innovation within general tech across the country, and when we actually take time to take all of that bright, youthful innovation and put that towards hard problems within government, that's where we can start making really big advances. And so that's really closely aligned with me and my family's history serving in the military. So,
great. Hi, everyone. So my name is Brendan. I'm the co-founder of Holly. We help local governments hire faster with better market intelligence. And so maybe just to get a quick show of hands, who here has worked in the government before? Okay, so like a good cluster. Who here wants to work in government? Okay, and then who maybe would want to work in government if the jobs were better? Okay, so then that kind of fills out the rest of the room. We're trying to deal with that third category of helping local governments design great jobs, first by benchmarking compensation, but then really getting deep into the core characteristics that make those roles attractive to apply for, and helping them work through a huge amount of administrative process. I really like what Rob said about administrivia that we help facilitate. And the reason why I'm really excited about Civic Tech is that I think really all of the core problems of our time route through government readiness for change, and Civic Tech helps with government readiness for change. So if you care about climate change, it really matters to get permitting right so that we can have all of the $3 trillion of investment in the grid that we need. If you really care about cybersecurity, your water authority really matters that they don't lose water, because I like drinking water. And then if you really care about AI, we need more things like the AI house, and that takes zoning, and that takes permitting, and all of these other things. So what we're trying to do is enable the workforce that makes all of those things possible.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Martin Ramirez. I am the co-founder and CEO of Signify. We help consumer product manufacturing operations streamline compliance with AI agents. So far today, from the time you woke up to now, you probably interacted with a few dozen consumer products, from the toothpaste you use, your cosmetics, what you have for lunch. We help the makers of those products ensure that all the way from formulation to taking those products to the shelf, they are to quality and safety, and we do it in a programmatic way with the deployment of AI agents. One of the reasons that I'm very excited about that intersection between industry and public institution and government is to open up the marketplace of ideas and understanding on how do we actually make these products compliant and safe. Even the interpretation of the regulations, taking that interpretation into actionable audits that we can do from the formulation to distribution of these products remains pretty much a black box. I strongly believe that manufacturing is one of the most important sectors of our economy, and reducing and eliminating any burden and bottlenecks that allow us to produce the best product possible is extremely important for not only the maker of the product, but the consumers at the other end of the equation as well.
Thank you guys so much. Xander, you were saying earlier there's this kind of juxtaposition between like making and breaking things fast and what we all kind of know like in the startup world versus like maybe the speed of the government. And so with that reality, like that the government can't afford to like break, how do you kind of balance that need to like move fast and break things and also make sure that it's not going to break as it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of policies in place, especially within defense, where those failure of those systems can mean life or death. And so operationally, yes, you cannot afford to field systems that are at risk of failing. But when it comes to R&D, I think there's actually a lot of room for startups to move fast and break things, because when you look at even the largest primes, defense contractors, they receive tens of billions of dollars for programs that are never operationalized, right? And if that money was allocated towards smaller shops, startups that are operating towards specific problems, specifically problems that are messaged by the DoD that this is where we need people to actually be working and not, I think it was characterized once as the spaghetti problem, where people are just throwing solutions that the DoD does not need. I think that money were allocated, there's actually a lot of room in the R&D phase to move quickly, make mistakes, correct course, and ultimately take the right steps to deliver an operational product at the end.
Yeah, I would say, so I've worked both in government. I was in the Baltimore mayor's office for several years, so I was sad to hear that Rob chose Seattle over Baltimore, but you know, we'll get you next time. But when I was there, I thought there were two core things that we needed to do. One was be open to failure. So like if we're trying things that have risk, they will fail. And so we need to be open when we try out a new pilot program to the fact that it might fail and nobody's going to get in trouble for taking a risk. And then two is then set up the structure so that if you do fail, if you do really break something, somebody's benefits still get delivered. So I think what that takes when you're starting with a vendor just very tactically is identifying what part of the organization they're going to be accountable for, what sort of specific sort of subset if you're doing a pilot, set up a little bit of like duplicative services so that you can identify, okay, even if this like two people in a basement coding something together, they really don't know what they're doing, they were vibe coding and it all broke, we'd still be able to make sure that those services are delivered, and we're checking in between the vendor and the jurisdiction regularly enough that we can actually spot problems quickly. I think in the partnerships that we've done that have worked the best, I've had weekly meetings with the jurisdiction, gone in person. I'm actually just coming up from doing that in San Jose, and then I'm headed north to another county in Washington for that like on-site time, which I think is so critical so that we can sort of build that openness of communication to solve those problems.
Actually, something you mentioned that is very relevant around the outlet for failure has to do with the structure. So thank you. Has to do a lot with the structure of all the parameters of that failure itself. What I mean by in the context of consumer products, the risk classification of the product itself sets the parameters in which the failure tolerance can be thrown. When we work with a class 3 medical device, the rules that are very discrete and the consequences of non-compliance are quite consequential. It's not a fine or a recall in someone's life that you are most likely putting at risk. So understanding the parameters of the evaluation, which techniques can be deployed for certain types of validation, truly sets the context and the risk posture for failure. I think one extra component in the context of compliance, which in our world is mostly on the industry side where it applies to the regulator, is understanding that there is a degree of automation that we provide with AI agents, but the final determination of product safety still being declared by a subject matter expert. So that dampers the risk exposure to what could come from the early cavalier startup trying to run faster, quicker, and better.
Thanks. So each of you have to like navigate working with government as customers and partners. For the people like in the audience who are like thinking about it, what's something, if you could go back, what's something you would have maybe done differently or wish you would have known before starting that journey?
Yeah, I think as has been the theme today, no one has ever accused the government of being too fast. And so I think while there was a general understanding of this, I think having a clear roadmap where you're not developing anything that is specific for contracts that you believe you might acquire, for example. I think this is a reason I'm a big advocate of a dual use thesis. Whatever that you're building for your commercialized side of your business, how that then plugs in with perhaps more lower touch adaptation to a real government need is going to, especially as a startup, be a lot safer than trying to build out for some use case that you're not guaranteed to get funded for. Yeah, I'll talk about a failure of mine. So I'd say understanding that incentives in government are, they are just different, and they're different at different levels. I was getting started with a jurisdiction and going through a sale process, and I had a lot of conversations with it's called the class and compensation analyst, the person in the HR department who's actually designing these roles within government. And we've gotten so deep down the rabbit hole of a problem that he desperately needed to be solved. And I understood, like, okay, we've got this sale. We really have this set up. And then I started talking to his boss. And I was, saying, hey, I understand this is your top priority. This is the one thing that you need solved right now. And here's how we're going to do it. And how would this change your operations? And he said, well, that's really at the bottom of my list. And that was because I'd only really understood one layer of the problem space. And I've had the same problem the other way. I've spoken to the HR director and gotten really deep into understanding why something's not working for them. And then they're just about ready to go. And then, somebody who would actually be implementing the work hasn't been clued in and hasn't been keyed into the process. And so then, they can be, it's a veto point. And so understanding that there are multiple veto points at multiple levels, sometimes the workflow matters, sometimes the deep outcome matters, and you need to be able to be fluent at every level of that communication with the people who are actually doing the work, the people who are overseeing it. That I think is what makes it possible to sell into government.
In our case, in looking at this through the go-to-market lens, we work with mostly industry. There's a symbiotic value added to the regulator side of the house. What that implies as you're building your go-to-market strategy is you have a multi-sided business model. And one of the things that we are very diligent, and I recommend to most people who are dealing with different permutations of a multi-sided business model, at least initially in your go-to-market, be myopic by design and be decide. Deliver value, de-risk the value proposition, and build those use cases and snowball it as you cross to the other side of your ICP, if you will. So doing too much too soon for too many ICPs will dry your resources, and you will end up being nothing for everyone.
So during the fireside, we were chatting about how the salary expectations, there are certain like barriers to getting people and team members on your side. Do you guys have any like hacks, or maybe not even just like your own example, but see anything else that works in getting people to jump on board with the mission?
Yeah, I think that a clear understanding of what the mission is, right, appeals to the mission, as they were discussing on the previous panel. I think that this extends both from what you can do as a company, but also within government. I think that, especially as people are looking to work within government itself, there's a lot of young talent that thinks government is gray and boxy. We've kind of raised them with what innovation should look like, general tech, down to the aesthetics, and that's not really being communicated, let alone what the mission is. And I think especially with younger people, and especially in the fields that they're in, there's a general dose of skepticism about whatever they're working on. So the more clearly you can communicate what the mission is and what role they're going to play into it, and also maintaining trust in these institutions as well. I think even especially in these current times, keeping everything apolitical and make sure that you're building towards one unified mission is very important.
Yeah, I mean, I think coming mission first is really critical, especially for an early stage startup where, you know, we are not necessarily paying a whole lot better than government at all. We are not, you know, the equity could be worth $0. You're taking a risk. The point is we're working towards a mission that matters. And if we're able to solve it, we're going to be able to solve it in hundreds, thousands of jurisdictions across the country. And then, I mean, I think tactically just always be hiring. Right before this event, I was getting coffee with an old intern of mine, and I'm trying to get her to, you know, come on board. So, you know, it's just taking that time to constantly be, you know, finding people within outside your network, taking a chance on unusual career paths. But I think that it's not something that we've solved.
I will double down on mission first. I do think that there is an element of humility in how we communicate the vision. I think our industry at times overindulges in abusing key phrases like, we're revolutionizing. No, you're not. Let's be a little bit more humble in our invitation. One of the things that I find in the world that we're in, product compliance, is very palpable to see the consequence of our work. I was in a meeting recently, on a sales call, with a toy manufacturer who's evaluating safety from a chemicals perspective and managing the manufacturing process. I go upstairs, my daughter is actually playing with the toy. I was like, oh, this is not an abstract. I think the mission is very important, but I appreciate humility in the changes that we're actually going after. The other component is alignment in how we motivate people and how we get the best out of people. I'm an optimist. I think most people really like to build. They like an impact, and they like to win. People like to win. Building systems that allows them to figure what that means for them individually is one of the most important components of my job as a founder. And getting out of the way at the end of the day, and allowing them to dictate what that means within the context of the general direction that we're headed. And the last thing that I will say about this is when a potential new employee asks about compensation, when they ask about equity, when they ask about a potential exit or where do you see the business in 5 years, I do my best to scare them very quickly. The most likely outcome of this venture is that we fail. And not because of any externalities, but operator error. If that gives you vertigo, there are other places that you should go.
And I actually just want to echo that as well. I think for a lot of top performers, they're going to be immune to a lot of the language of, oh, we're revolutionizing something out of the box. Maybe you're making something more efficient to start, and maybe that can pave the way to, you know, change something more fundamental that does make a big difference. But for those people who think differently, those that you want to attract, they're probably not going to just drink the Kool-Aid and echo the same sentiments that, you know, oh, we're revolutionizing something with 3 people in the room day one, right? So
we do it here all the time.
yes.
And speaking of scary things, we've all seen like partnerships with cities where things actually do break, like I said. Like, you know, privacy concerns, vendor lock-in, projects that really just like don't deliver. Do you guys have any like key ingredients for partnerships like on both sides, things that like actually work?
Yeah, I think this is an open problem right in the field of governments working with companies. I think that alignment and expectations is, like any sort of partnership, critical. I think that evaluation, your method of evaluation, what framework you're using for that so that you can make sure you're making consistent progress in your goals. And I think to some extent it can also be more fundamental depending on the city. Maybe sometimes it's more on the government that you're working with than even the company. Like random example, but the French rail company that built the high-speed rail in France, you know, tried to, of course, do that in the state of California. They said it was so dysfunctional, the bureaucracy there, that they left to Morocco and North Africa to start building out their rail system because it was just, you know, a real pathway to actually start development. So I think when we think about these problems, it's a framework of evaluation both on the tech and government side.
Yeah, I totally echo being really honest about capabilities. And the other side of it is that the metrics that government uses are not, some of them are monetary metrics. You might be saving them $1 million, but you might also be saving them 300 units of housing. You might be creating a faster process around permitting, which is, you're not, the things that you're trying to quantify are not easily put into a P&L. And so it comes down to understanding, I think, the desires of the people that you're working with, being really open about the capabilities. And then, I think very tactically, when I've then gotten into the governments that we're working with, and we've gotten started, I think just getting very deep into the implementation process so that we can win on training, making sure that the people who are doing the work in what can be very bureaucratic organizations that can have, I was just talking with an organization with 8 different levels of approval to revise a job description. And that process can take 3 months at a time to go through just each step. Meanwhile, I'm hiring for a senior engineer, and we decided to change the title, and I went online and typed it in. That it's different. And being able to understand what are we actually going to be able to improve so that we can be honest about the quality that we are delivering, I think is the most important part.
I agree. It's all about having a well-understood agreement on the success criteria. And it would be very tempting, as we're trying to get the deal, to allow some ambiguity in what success is. Don't do it. It's going to backfire for the customer and for yourself. So being able to take in whatever the scope of your solution is and understanding how you're going to measure the success of that deployment and how the failure of that deployment is hypothesis invalidated, which, by the way, should be equally celebrated, but having that agreement or understanding with both sides of the table is the name of the game.
Brendan, you were talking a little bit about some of these barriers. What do you think is the biggest systemic barrier? How would you kind of tackle these, the barriers in civic tech, reaching its max potential?
I really like this question. What I keep seeing is sort of a graveyard between the pilot stage that a lot of jurisdictions, a lot of companies get into, and then actual implementation over multi-year. And I think that I'd like to say, the city or county or state or federal government should be doing something different, but I put a lot of the blame on the startup in not being able to manage this process effectively. So when we're going into, sometimes we do pilots with local governments, it is fully on us to be able to work with them and project manage with them on understanding the success criteria, understanding, okay, we're starting with your innovation fund budget, which is a totally separate line item, but then we need HR or we need somebody else to be willing to fund it. That's a totally new sale, potentially, if we're not managing that process from day one. So I'd say that's where the most, maybe you think you've won because you've gotten the pilot, but that really is just the start.
Just to follow up, when I look at agents and things like that speeding up all of our workflows, does that, you think, apply also to government? Will we see things speeding up also because maybe they'll implement some of these tools?
The formal approvals is part of it, but it's with government, I think it really does get very personal from a small number of decision makers, and I think we can cut out, I think about the hiring timeline, for instance. It takes 135 days on average to hire in the public sector because there's so many levels of approval. I think you can probably cut that down to 40, 45 by getting better processes and just driving more sort of agentic reviews, all of those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, you do still have additional steps that exist for a reason, because we want to prevent corruption, we want to prevent sort of self-dealing, and governments are choosing to have those be done by people for a reason, and I don't expect that to change for a while.
I only ask because I want to get permits done to renovate this building much faster.
It's a great building.
I keep getting weird comments about the timeline. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so again, kind of just speaking to this from the defense lens, there exist what are called SITRs, Small Business Innovation Research Contracts. A lot of startups will pursue those to work with DoD. And like he mentioned, Brendan mentioned, the vast majority of these companies that win a phase 1 or direct to phase 2, there's 3 total phases, will never transition past phase 2 to phase 3. And so phase 1 and 2 are fixed amounts of cash to develop towards some sort of objective. Phase 3 can be much more open-ended, but it requires both commercialization and ideally operationalization with DoD. And so I think that the reason that a lot of these contracts never get operationalized happens kind of at conception, because when these contracts are reviewed, it is, as Rob mentioned earlier, long and arduous. It is an open, essentially, request for proposal, and more critically, these companies that are being reviewed for these scoped contracts are not subject matter experts. So there could be a really precise company that has built directly out for this, and just their personal experience, potential bias, the best company might not be selected. But this is being fixed, not only in just how these internal processes are handled within DoD, but there are also new initiatives like CTO, which is the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office within the DoD, highly focused on finding the best companies who have the best existing product or market or can best adapt their technologies to serve specific purposes, and match them with customers within DoD directly, essentially sole sourcing, which you wouldn't be able to do unless you're a company that received a phase 2 Civic to begin with. So eliminating a lot of those barriers, a lot of that red tape to even start talking to the right people within DoD, being much more focused, and doing so in a way that even touches back to some of the higher level points like aesthetics, like Tailwinds AI is an affiliate of CDAO, highly focused on exactly what we're talking about, fast-moving startups who can best serve their purposes today.
From my perspective, I think something you mentioned around the realization of speed, or can we go faster because we're deploying agents, it always plays back to the triple constraint model in change management, right? You have people, technology, and processes. And that goes back to the previous conversation around the success criteria. People in organizations tend to be really bad at measuring time gains. Unless you have like a microsecond gain in latency or in manufacturing process, it just goes into the ether very quickly. So contextualizing any potential savings from a timing perspective on the other two vectors of that triple constraint is very important. On the other side, from our side in the market, one of the most challenging barriers that we deal with is the, in my opinion, made-up layers of complexities on regulations. You have a very convoluted CFR language overlaid by the language and interpretation of the enforcer, for the most part the FDA, and then a couple dozen layers of lawyers and consultants monetizing that ambiguity. And here comes the computer nerds that figure out how to remove that abstraction naively. So it's an interesting breaking away or disrupting the status quo. There are economies that have been built around those layers of complexities that we have to navigate against.
And yeah, just a last note, I actually know of a few companies that exist purely around helping you navigate, the bureaucracy and like going through the contracting process. Those companies should not exist, right? There should not be enough of a market for these companies to exist to charge you hundreds of thousands of dollars just to make sure that you can actually work with the government when you have even an existing solution for them.
Yeah, interesting. To that point, you guys obviously all have partnerships. If you could tell me maybe just vaguely how you got that partnership. Did you have a friend? Did you cold call, just email somebody? And then what advice might you have to somebody that wants to start that partnership? Maybe not through the sketchy website, that's very expensive.
Yeah, so we exclusively sell to governments, and the way that I find them is direct outreach. We're starting to get some really great referrals from one government to another. I think Rob had mentioned that local governments talk to each other a lot, and the success stories really, really matter. There are email lists of all of the HR directors in Northern California or in the Seattle region, and these are really important sharing networks that where one case study turns into many. I think a lot of it is just sort of core enterprise sales, reaching out to people, understanding their business problem, and I think we shouldn't necessarily think of government as too different there. It's finding the person who has the pain point and having enough value to get their time, rather than just saying please give me an hour of your time in your busy day.
From our perspective, going back to the multi-sided business model that I alluded to, we framed the pump on the industrial side. Now we're going into the government side with evidence. And the entry point for the most part has been our mentors and advisors and doing good old outbound and knocking on the right doors. But now I'm walking into those conversations with evidence. Did you know that this product manufacturer has been outpacing your regulator every time they ask a question because they have significant?
Yeah, I would say certainly direct outreach. My co-founder also had an unusual journey where he actually went from defense into gaming, which is probably not that usual of a journey, but being able to harken back to that previous experience, some of those connections, but also be able to point to today's current commercial success, and it's no longer so hypothetical, bridging that gap between the commercial application and then to defense. So again, just advocating for the dual use thesis.
Awesome, thank you. I know we want to get to networking and chatting with everybody, but I also wanted to open it up for any questions that you guys might have. Roy, I think you were very excited to chat. Yeah.
Sorry, it's great.
Yeah, so she was asking about ATO, Authority to Operate, which is, I didn't mention it, the acronym itself, but we were talking about it's fine to move fast and break things while you're in research, but when it actually comes time to operationalize that technology, it can be very difficult. It really depends on which agency or part of the government you're working with. I think DARPA is particularly difficult because all of their product managers are on approximately 3-year rotations. So by the time you really start making progress, your champion is out the door. And in my experience, what we've interfaced with DARPA, I don't think that they have stood up as many programs as we're seeing within DoD to try to address some of these issues. But I think that they are paying attention and will hopefully begin to implement some of that themselves.
So, what I'm experiencing is
Universally.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to throw out a comment.
Yeah.
I work with government in Canada a lot, and so we have these agencies that already have relationships and manage all the applications, and then we're a resource for them. And so we don't actually have to do that. We do the application process together, but it makes it a lot easier because they have the inroads, they have the relationships, they attend all the meetings about whatever pieces of money that they are, and so we're in for millions of dollars of funding because they put tons, of course in Canada because of everything going on, they put a lot into that, and I do the same with some in the US, but the Canadian ones seem to be a little bit faster.
Can I turn your comment into a question?
Yes. Please do it.
At any level of government, is there somebody that might be described as ombudsman, who's a really good person as you're getting in to be the river guy for you in the United States?
Great question.
Yeah, I mean, the first person I usually speak to is the HR director. Sometimes it is the CTO. Sometimes I've met someone at a conference who intros me to the right person. For small jurisdictions, there's a city manager or assistant city manager who can be good to talk to. But I think only in the biggest jurisdictions would there really be a core, sort of referee, ombudsman kind of person. I've just gone direct, and I think my general thesis is that it's best to talk to the person who's feeling the pain. So,
is your solution for HR?
Yeah, we sell into HR departments directly. It generally comes out of their budget, and we're helping them design their roles. So it's fully within their department.
You guys both know this. You're like, yeah. I wish.
Any last questions? Okay. Cool. Well, I just wanted to thank the panel members again so much for being part of this. Please stay and network. There's some pizzas left over, so please eat them, or else I have to take them all to my 14-year-old child. And I appreciate you guys all for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good job. Yeah, great job. That's good. Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you. No, please do. I know. Alrighty, Martine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just so you know,
Yes.
so we've been want to sell in
since the receipt.
I can probably just like, great, there are humans who are talking about it.
Man, you know, I think I'm